shorter than average girl from down under, and happy National Science Week for all my geeks and freaks. Don't worry, I'm one too, so you're in good company. And today we're going to be looking at the fourth Delta Request book, The Shifting Sands. So this book is probably my favorite in series 1, excluding the finale, because it just tickles all my interests. It's a book about probability and possibility. The villain, human nature itself. If you don't count Mother Brightly, of course. But basically all the ingredients for a trippy story to tickle all the senses of maths lovers. Now, interestingly, the anime takes a completely different approach. I mean, the things that I've said already don't exactly translate very well to a visual medium. So instead, the anime personifies the villain in a way which appears to be a separate and a mindful entity. It does retract from the psychological pressure, particularly on Leaf, but it doesn't make the story worse by any shot. Despite the number of changes in the story's detail, this arc in the anime has been my favorite so far. I mean, no thanks to the Rhythmia games, and of course the proper introduction to my favorite character. So I'm very biased here. If you're here for the book review, then you can skip to the timestamp shown on the screen right now, or the one in the description, whichever suits you best. But for now, let's talk story. After burning most of the city of the rats, and Akbaba, which is one of the Shadow Lord's birds, is set to suss things out. And the trio were almost outed if it weren't for the help of some kind silverfish and Leaf's invisibility cloak. So they finally get to relax in an apple orchard on the other side of the broad river before they get kicked out by a crazy apple-growing beekeeper. With no money, no food, and no place to stay, our trio make it to Rhythmia, a town running Deltora's biggest annual fighting competition, where the biggest and best fighters take each other out in the arena, with the winner getting a whopping 1,000 golden coins. So the three sign up at the Gamers Inn. The innkeeper, Mother Brightly, gives them bedding, food, and drinks for exchange of their 100% effort at the games. And they deliver, each making it to the final 8. With the other 5 contestants being the couple Orwin and Joanna, a jawless named Glock, a cunning girl called Narita, and the man they met in Tom's shop, Doom. So Barda versus Doom, and loses. Leaf versus Narita, and also loses. And Jasmine was meant to be versing Orwin, but Glock beats the hell out of Joanna, and Orwin goes to save his wife, getting himself disqualified. So the semi-finalists end up being Glock, Narita, Doom, and our girl Jasmine. As the semi-finalists were preparing for their fights, a boy comes and hands everybody Queen Bee apple cider, the product of the cranky old lady that they meet at the start. But Jasmine wasn't in the mood. And a good thing too, because her and Narita's mugs were drugged to get Glock and Doom into the finals. But because Jasmine didn't want hers, Glock ends up drinking it instead, leaving Doom to verse Jasmine. And damn, was it brutal. Doom unknowingly pulls the mummy card on Jasmine, and we know how touchy-feely she can get about her mother, so she goes absolute berserk and destroys the match. So now our trio have enough money to keep them well off for the rest of the quest. But then Mother Brightly warns them that bandits and thieves are probably watching them, waiting for them to get out of the city so that they could rob them, and suggests that they take a slightly different backwards route to get out of the city. So they make their way out using that when they get plunked on the head and taken by grey guards to the Shadow Arena, a gladiator a ring in the Shadowlands for the Shadow Lord's muse. But luckily they get rescued by the story's official MVP, Doom. If you know, you know. But if you don't, then all we get to know about him in this book is that he is the head of the Resistance. And ever since he saw them in Tom's shop, he's been keeping up with their news and knows that whatever they're doing is really good. He tells them that the Resistance has suspected the Rhythmia Games and wanted to figure out what is actually happening by infiltrating them. That meant that Doom would have to join the games and that the Resistance would have to rig the results to find out the truth. Hence the boy Dane drugging the contestants. He even goes as far as asking them to join the Resistance, but of course they got the quest, so they had to say no. And so they part ways with the trio making their way to the Shifting Sands and Doom going back to save Glock and Narita, who are also on their way to the Shadow Arena. The trio finally make it to the Shifting Sands, but is uneasy. He recognizes it as the place in the Opal's vision. Plus, there's this whole annoying buzzing that only seems to bother him. As they trudge through the sands, the grey guards that had captured them had caught up, only to be eaten by a terrifying creature of the sands, which in later books we find out is called Teriyaki. So yeah. But to their surprise, the gold coins that the Grey Guards dropped were all gone, with only their imprints left in the sand. As they notice the markings, a huge sandstorm blows and rearranges the shape of the entire desert. This gives Leaf the heebie-jeebies. So much so, he asks Barda to tie them all together so that they can't be separated. And they keep walking aimlessly, waiting for either the belt to warm or the guardian of the gem to find them. Unfortunately, when they do get tired and Barda and Jasmine want some rest, they untie themselves from Leaf. And as if the Shifting Sands knew, another storm comes and picks up Leaf, separating him from his friends. After hours of walking, Jasmine and Barda finally find Leaf, who is neck high in the sand at this point. But while he was there, he had time to ponder and figure out that the sand itself was the guardian of the gem. Millions and millions of bees collecting spoils for their hive. So, wherever the gem was dropped, that was 16 years ago, the bees must have picked it up and put it in their hive where they collect everything. All they needed to do was find it, which they eventually do, a huge volcano in the middle of the sands, but inside, a giant treasure trove. Using smoke, Leaf eases the bees and manages to find and take the Lapis Lazuli, making it back to Barda and Jasmine, and they all leave the Shifting Sands handy dandy. So, other than the Rhythmia Games, there was literally no adventure in this book. But you honestly didn't need it, because you needed all the mental gymnastics to try and figure out what was happening to Leaf. This thing was literally like a muted survival horror. Human nature and survival instincts are the enemy of our trio. From almost drowning in the shallow parts of the broad river to gambling for survival, Jasmine's shame in the Rhythmia Games, and the tricks of the mind of the Shifting Sands. Letting instinctually charged emotions take the wheel was the biggest problem, which is why I like it, because it can get very philosophical if you dig into it. But before we do so, let's talk about the differences between the book and the anime. As I mentioned earlier, the anime does a really good job at fostering trust and communication between our companions. Half of it is because exposition is necessary to keep us, the audience, in the loop, and the other half because focusing on internal feelings is a lot more difficult on the screen than it is in a book. And we kind of do see the struggle that the anime faces when trying to convey Leaf's hallucinogenic state in the Shifting Sands. Like, that bit with his parents and the talking apples was weird. But I like the consequence it had on the development of our trio more than in the books. We get to see all three of their caring sides and how they have grown to understand and believe one another, willing to risk their own life on another person's gut feeling. That's not the state of their relationship in the books. Jasmine still hasn't fully amalgamated into the group as a consequence of her lack of understanding of normal social cues. And Barda still has a tinge of sarcastic resentment towards Leaf for all those years of babysitting in Dell. As for Leaf, the vision of the opal has already made him paranoid about parts of this quest already, leading him to make less than ideal choices as well. The lack of their basic survival needs lets us see an uglier side to our protagonists. I mean, they are human, and humans are flawed. And in trial and tribulations, relationships are tested. And this is exactly what we end up seeing. Each of our trio's past comes to play a part in their decision making in this book. Whether it be Leaf seeing his parents, Jasmine versing Doom, or Barda and his resentment towards what he had to make himself to survive those years during the Shadow Lord invasion in Dell. But at the end, it's only when they let go of these fears and reservations that they are able to come out of this quest unscathed. The anime goes down more of a traditional route, yet it kind of keeps the same themes. They are forced to do things out of necessity. Their survival instincts are still prevalent, but there is a big final boss at the end that they need to defeat, and of course it was my girly Jasmine who does the job. But generally speaking, if you haven't noticed a pattern so far, I'm going to point something out. The theme of each book matches the gem found in it, and in turn, the story of the tribes that we meet. So in the first book, they find the topaz, the symbol of faith, which belongs to the trading and exploring tribe. So the discussion is about fate, goal setting, and deciding one's future. A message needed for a tribe which makes its decisions based on money, prosperity, and adventure. With a guardian who's hell-bent on his self-defined purpose that he's basically lost the scope of the world around him and abandoned faith for his own work towards his goal. In the second book, they find the ruby, the symbol of happiness, which belongs to a hard-working tribe. So the discussion is emotional, trying to find inner strength and positivity in hard times. The guardian seeks power but lacks happiness, whilst the tribe draws power from their happiness, eventually allowing them to defeat the guardian. In the third book, our trio find the gem of hope, belonging to the aristocratic plains people, a peoples whose luxuries was turned into fear and then controlled by the Shadow Lord, to the extent that hope was no longer in the vernacular of these people. And finally, the fourth book. The trio find the Lapis Lazuli, the Heavenly Stone, a talisman to ward off evil and bring luck to its wearer. And speaking of luck, the Lapis Lazuli belongs to the Mare tribe, a people fond of games and gambling. Very fitting. In a story consisting of competition and survival, luck, or more accurately, possibility of the best outcome, is what everyone is going to hope for. And I don't use the word hope idly here, because according to the Book of Deltora, the Lapis Lazuli and the Opal have a special bond. So much so that the Opal helps Leaf to find the Lapis Lazuli in the hive. Now, in face value, insight and future foresight seems to be the exact opposite of divinity and luck. So why does Emily Rodda put them together? Why are the opal and the lapis lazuli linked? Now, the truth is that there is no explanation for this given in the book. So from this point forward, it's going to be my understanding of the opal and the lapis lazuli's power from all the Deltora Quest books. So I'm going to do my best not to spoil any plot points. I just want to preface this discussion by saying that my understanding, of course, is influenced by my profession, my interests, and my philosophy. Others may have a very different interpretation, but that is totally fine, because the beauty of analysis is It's subjective. So for me, I see two characteristics of the opal and the lapis lazuli. One which appears physical and the other which appears metaphysical. So the physical ones are sight and luck, and the metaphysical ones are foresight and divinity. Let's start with the physical characteristics. Sight is a sense that we use to observe the world around us. And for humans, it's the most prominent sense. We basically let it guide our understanding of the world, even going as far as to converting signals for our other senses into ones that we can visually observe. And from observations, we produce facts. Whereas on the other hand, luck suggests randomness, the ability to surpass probability and do the possible, but improbable. Have I lost you yet?
You've confused possibilities with probabilities. According to your analogy, when I go home, I might find $1 million on my bed, or I might not.
As humans, we have the tendency to mix up words with very similar meanings, like possibility and probability. But these two are very different. Probability is the measure of possibility based on past observations and how we explain them. Like, it's possible to roll a 6, but it's only a 16.666666% chance in a single roll. So why is this difference so important? Well, because just as we mix up possibility and probability, we also mix up impossibility and improbability. It's not impossible to win the lottery, but it's highly improbable. And now I know what you're thinking. Why is this kid giving us a maths lesson? I didn't sign up for this. I mean, we know how a die works. And yeah, that is true. But the thing is, probability and statistics are everywhere in our life and in our decision making. Remember when I talked about the opal and sight? Well, this drives our predictions, our calculation of probability. What about the things that we don't know or we don't observe? Can we predict them? And if not, then are they possible? And so this is where our discussion gets interesting. Humans are limited, and the tools that we use to observe are limited, which means that we don't actually catch everything. And consequently, our predictions are not 100% accurate. We miss things, but they still occur. And we've coined the term random to describe them. These things that only occur due to chance. I'll keep going to help make this clearer. The truth is, randomness does not exist. But it's a way of us humans saying that we have no idea how to observe these things to the degree that we can figure out why they happen and therefore be able to predict them. A good example of this is rain. So we don't have the tools to observe every single water molecule to tell us exactly when it will be cool enough to precipitate and then grow heavy enough for it to fall out of the sky. Instead, our tools can tell us how moist and cool a particular area of air is in a particular time. And then we use physics on the entire mass of air to estimate how cool and moist the air needs to be for it to be able to produce rain. And based on how long that's going to take, we then look at what the winds look like to figure out where that rain is going to fall. So basically, based on our current understanding of physics, a rain forecast is made, giving us the percentage area which will get rain in a particular time. The position of each single raindrop is random because as it stands, we can't observe the formation of every single raindrop. But that's not to say that rain happens randomly, because the physical processes are the same for every single raindrop. But we just have no way of telling or predicting where or when that's going to happen. So randomness is the lack of sight, but that doesn't make it any less valuable. There is a quote that I love to live by. Half of knowledge is having the ability of saying, I don't know. Because understanding that we are limited and things that are out of our control or ability to understand will happen, aka random things, gives us power over our future. Being prepared for the improbable makes us able to cope with the unexpected. Therefore, it would have less impact on us in the long run. And without realizing it, we do this in our daily lives every day. Like, who here keeps an umbrella in their car just in case it rains? Or someone whose anaphylaxis always carries their EpiPen with them. Or mothers who always carry a change of clothes for their toddlers. Because we can't predict whether or not we may get wet, when an allergen may be around us, or when a toddler's gonna soil their clothes, we prepare for the unexpected. And so in some way, luck is nothing more than the positive random result. It depends on the thing being possible for it to work. And this is evident by two different situations where Leaf uses the lapis lazuli in the books. But I'm going to focus on one particular situation for now. There is a point where Leaf is forced to play fraudulent games, and the lapis lazuli doesn't actually help Leaf to win any of them. That is because none of the games are actually winnable. The lapis lazuli cannot give Leaf luck because it is impossible to win. If something is impossible, then you can't be lucky to get it. So when it comes to the gems, the opal helps us gain clarity about the things that we can understand and see, whereas the lapis lazuli helps us find clarity in the things that we don't understand or can't see in the moment. So in truth, when it comes to the physical attributes of these gems, they do go hand in hand, completing the role of the other. Now, when it comes to their metaphysical traits, they also go in hand. The opal's foresight allows one to surpass the uncertainty of being unable to predict one's future by presenting one of the outcomes based on the individual's current state, place, and time. But as your state, location, and name changes, the precision of that calculation into the future changes as well, therefore increasing the possible outcomes for your future. This is called the butterfly effect. So the more changes which occurs, the more possibilities there potentially are, one of which could still be the outcome presented by the opal. Foresight changes sight to chance, meaning that the opal's metaphysical ability opposes its physical one, and in fact works with the physical ability of the lapis lazuli. And on the contrary, the lapis lazuli's talismanic ability to ward off evil removes chances of possible outcomes to one precise future of you being safe, which is how our trio make it out of the shifting sands without encountering any of the sand creatures or dangers in their situation. So the metaphysical ability of the lapis lazuli opposes its physical one and also aids the physical ability of the opal, making the two a force to reckon with when they're combined. And this story is here to prove it. Other than leading Leaf to the lapis lazuli, the opal didn't actually do anything for them because they weren't in a state of no. Throughout this quest, our trio have been in survival mode, which is essentially the mode of expecting the unexpected, where instinct triumphs over rationale. However, unlike any of the other parts of the quest, two things have changed in this particular book. One, they've lost all their preparedness and resources, and two, Leaf has insight to the future. These two things lead our trio to have increased paranoia and reduced decision-making skills, particularly Leaf. Now, for Barda and Jasmine, their reasoning wasn't as impaired because they were going into the shifting sands blind, unlike Leaf. But there are instances where we can see the harsh state of fending off for themselves getting the better of them. Like when they were robbed of their key in the Gamer's Inn, when Doom lets Barda lose his focus in the fight due to his fear of being found out, when Jasmine is blinded by anger and defeats Doom, when they trust Mother Brightly's plan to go use the back alley, and when they untie themselves from Leaf in the shifting sands. I'm not blaming Barda or Jasmine for making these wrong decisions, but it's a good example of how insecurity as a result of unpredictability influences our human instincts. Progress and long-term planning are both hindered by the immediate threat to one's person, and so the brain goes overdrive trying to minimize the unpredictability rather than becoming more apt for embracing changes and adapting to them. And we can see this fact in the state of the world. People facing famine, hardship, and war are always in a state of trying to create stability and control. Whereas those who are better off and with more resources and a routine, they tend to have more space in their life for existential problems. Both mindsets bring innovation to the world, but they have their own fatigues as well. In the case that we're talking about, the drawback is fear of the future and mental fatigue. And then with Leaf, we get the added bonus that he's actively trying to do things differently to prevent the vision of the opal from coming true. He knows one of the possible outcomes for the future and is trying to figure out how not to get it. The events in the book occur the way that they do because of the high state of uncertainty that our trio were in. Each was fighting to get back some kind of control, hoping that that control would provide them with some kind of reassurance or a guarantee. And so they quibbled, they disagreed, and disapproved of each other because in their head, that isn't one of the methods which will bring a successful outcome for them. And so this created tension between them, so much so they would rather not communicate to save face than to work together as a team. And so Leaf doesn't tell Barda or Jasmine about the buzzing. He doesn't explain the reason why he wants to be tied up to them. And then when he does get swept away, he doesn't go looking for them, but instead heads towards the hive. If I were Barda and Jasmine, I would also be concerned and frustrated. But the truth is that they didn't give Leaf a safe place to open up, to allow him to communicate without judgment. And that's because they were also paranoid and hyper-vigilant, all as a consequence of the uncertainty playing on their brain. And so there was no need for an evil guardian in this book. Fear of the future was going to take out all three of our protagonists. Human nature was the enemy in this book, and it almost won. It's actually incredible what we humans can do in hard times, but at the same time, it's in these situations which humans are more vulnerable because our too proactive mind and instincts are more likely to miss the unpredictable yet possible things which could happen. In fight and flight mode, humans are only prepared for survival, limiting their vision to one task at a time. And this novel is an excellent summary of this human condition. Not only does it remove the presence of an evil guardian, instead having the harshest of natural elements being the trio's challenge, but it contextualizes the philosophical discussion of randomness with its statistical study of probabilities through the easiest method of understanding it, which is games and gambling. Like, I know that you all did probability problems with games and gambling at school because they are the easiest problems to understand when it comes to uncertainty. Games and gambling don't attack our fight and flight responses as real survival would. And so we can study these concepts without being cognitively invested in controlling the results. You can say that we're creating a controlled environment for our brain to learn and understand the uncontrolled. And boy, does this book do that. Kids won't understand the deeper meaning of the effects of uncertainty on human behavior from this book, but they will definitely learn about chance, control, and instinct, which personally, I still think is a big win. This entire book is based on Leaf's view of these events. So there's a heavier focus on the fear which comes from knowing something bad will happen and not having a way to cope with or to change your perspective on things. Although the adult discussion about fear and uncertainty is muted in the anime, I actually enjoyed the anime episodes a lot, as I mentioned previously. And personally, I do think that for kids, it's a better way to go when telling the story. I mean, no matter how much I love the fact that the hive was a normalish bee colony in the book, and that all the bad stuff in the shifting sands was actually natural, perceived as bad by our trio, I don't think that kids are going to understand that. So having an evil villain makes sense and makes it more entertaining for a younger audience. Which kind of makes me sad because I really enjoyed this book, but I've got to be honest with myself and to you about its content. I love it because I'm interested in the concepts that it discusses. So sorry for taking you down that rabbit hole. I'm working with probabilities and uncertainties on a daily basis. So this stuff is literally my Roman Empire. But it's definitely not everyone's cup of tea, so don't take this review as objective. It is very subjective. That's the fourth book of the DQ series, The Shifting Sands. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out on more Del Toro Quest or movie content coming up. Chuck any movie suggestions that you'd like me to analyze in the comments. Because of DQ, I won't be taking any major series at the moment, but if you've got any standalone movies that you'd like me to analyze, please do let me know. So be brave, be happy, and be kind, and we'll catch you all next time.